Did brave knights truly risk everything for their beloveds were damsels in distress, more than just fainting figures in flowing gowns? Did love conquer all, even the most formidable fortresses and the darkest sorcery across the lands of the Middle Ages long ago? Number 5. The Knight of the Cart and the Queen's Freedom. Sir Lancelot of the Lake, the foremost knight of King Arthur's Round Table, found himself in a torment, not of battle wounds, but of the heart. His devotion to Queen Guinevere was a truth known to many, a bond of fealty and affection that soared beyond the ordinary. Queen, radiant and regal, found herself ensnared by a cruel and cunning plot hatched by Sir Meleagant, a knight whose twisted mind harbored an obsessive desire for her. Meleagant, son of King Bagdemagus, had launched a surprise attack upon the Queen's retinue during a joyous May Day celebration. He had ridden forth from his hidden kingdom, a land shrouded in mist and guarded by perilous passages, and had swept the Queen away to his impenetrable fortress, a place where no one ever returned. The news reached Camelot like a poisoned arrow striking at the very heart of the kingdom. King Arthur was distraught. The Round Table knights were in an uproar, and Lancelot, his spirit aflame with righteous fury and an unyielding ache of worry, swore an oath to rescue his queen or perish in the attempt. The path to Meleagant's kingdom was not merely long but riddled with traps and impossible choices. Meleagant had designed his domain as a maze of trials, a testament to his own depraved genius. Lancelot, along with his fellow knight Sir Gawain, set out immediately. They rode through dense, ancient forests where shadows clung to the trees like shrouds, and across desolate plains where the wind whispered forgotten warnings. Their horses, sturdy and true, carried them for many days. But the true test lay ahead. They encountered a river so wide and swift, its waters churning with an unseen malevolence that no bridge spanned it. There was only a single narrow bridge submerged just beneath the surface, treacherous and unseen, designed to swallow any who dared to cross. Lancelot, guided by an inner resolve, dismounted and led his horse, feeling for purchase. With every careful step, the river tugged at his armor, threatening to drag him into its icy depths. But he persevered, his mind fixed on the Queen's plight. Gawain, unable to see the hidden path, watched with growing dread, ultimately turning back to seek another way, leaving Lancelot to face the unknown alone. Further into Meleagant's territory, Lancelot came upon another horrifying obstacle. The Sword Bridge. This was no ordinary bridge. It was a blade of sharpened steel, keen as a razor, stretching across a chasm of untold depth. Below, fierce, jagged rocks waited like hungry teeth. The bridge was barely wider than a man's hand, its surface glinting with a deadly promise. Any misstep, any tremor of doubt, would mean certain death. Lancelot, his heart pounding but his resolve unwavering, knew this was the only way. He removed his gauntlets, his boots, and his mail shirt, stripping down to his tunic to better grip the blade. He began to crawl across, his bare hands and feet pressed against the biting edge. Each inch was an agony. The sharp steel sliced into his flesh, leaving deep gashes. Blood welled from his palms, marking his desperate passage, dripping into the abyss below. Pain was immense. A searing torment that threatened to overwhelm him, but he pushed it aside. The vision of Guinevere, captive and suffering, burned in his mind, fueling his strength. The journey across the Sword Bridge took hours, every muscle screaming, every nerve ablaze. When he finally reached the other side, his body was a tapestry of cuts and bruises, his strength all but spent. He continued his relentless pursuit, his wounds bleeding but his spirit unbroken. He encountered more of Meleagant's traps, from knights lying in ambush to hidden pits. But Lancelot, driven by a singular purpose, overcame each one with a mixture of skill and sheer will. He eventually reached Meleagant's fortified castle, a grim structure of dark stone that loomed like a nightmare against the sky. The castle was heavily guarded, its battlements bristling with armed men. Lancelot, despite his exhaustion and injuries, did not hesitate. He stormed the gate, cutting down guards with a ferocity born of desperation. He fought his way through courtyards filled with Meleagant's soldiers, his sword a blur of motion, a gleaming arc of justice. Clang of steel, the shouts of men, and the thud of falling bodies echoed through the stone halls. He searched room after room, his voice hoarse, as he called out for the queen. Finally, he found her. Queen Guinevere was held in a secure chamber within the highest tower, guarded by a select company of Meleagant's most loyal knights. The sight of her, pale but defiant, ignited a fresh surge of power within him. He cut down the last of her guards, their armor no match for his fury. He confronted Meleagant himself, a duel of epic proportions that shook the very foundations of the tower. Meleagant, a skilled fighter but corrupted by malice, met Lancelot's blows with a desperate strength. Swords clashed, sparks flew, and the air crackled with their fury. Lancelot, despite his earlier wounds, fought with a superhuman intensity. He struck Meleagant down, disarming him and leaving him defeated on the cold stone floor, but not killed, for Lancelot sought justice, not vengeance, allowing Meleagant's father to take his son away with Meleagant vanquished. Lancelot turned to the queen. Her eyes, filled with tears of relief and gratitude, met his. She was free. Lancelot, weary but triumphant, led her from the tower, through the still-burning castle, and out into the fading light of day. The journey back was still dangerous, but the greatest threat had been overcome. Lancelot had faced the sword bridge, defeated Meleagant, and rescued his queen Procyon through impossible odds, as recounted in Chrétien de Troyes Lancelot, the Knight of the Cart, a work often cited in various medieval manuscripts, such as the Guillaume manuscript from the late 12th century. This tale, a testament to a knight's unwavering love and his willingness to endure any pain, any challenge to save the one held dearest, became a foundational story in the Arthurian cycle, echoing through countless retellings from the 13th century Vulgate cycle, La Morte Arthurs. Number 4. The Lovers and the Leper's Pit. Isolde, the beautiful queen of Cornwall, found herself in a horrifying predicament, a fate decreed by a cruel twist of circumstances, and the vengeful decree of her husband, King Mark. Her passionate and forbidden love for Tristan, the king's most loyal knight and nephew, had been discovered. The whispers and suspicions that had long circulated among the court had finally found their undeniable proof, a betrayal that King Mark deemed unforgivable. In his rage and humiliation, the king condemned Isolde to a punishment more terrible than death. She was to be given over to the lepers, a community of outcasts living in the foulest conditions outside the city walls. This was a fate designed not just to end her life, but to strip her of all dignity, to transform her beauty into a horrifying spectacle of disease and despair, a public humiliation worse than any execution. The decree sent shivers through the court, a stark reminder of the king's absolute power and his wounded pride. Isolde, cloaked in despair, was dragged from the castle, her pleas unheard, her spirit broken. The procession moved slowly, a somber parade of grim-faced guards, leading the queen towards her unthinkable destiny. Tristan, who had been banished from the court, or perhaps had been absent at the time of the discovery, received the dreadful news with a shock that rattled him to his very core. His heart seized with a cold dread, knowing the torment that awaited Isolde. The thought of her, so radiant and vibrant, cast into such an abyss of suffering, was unbearable. He knew he could not stand by and let this monstrous injustice occur. Despite the immense danger to himself, despite the risk of further enraging the king and facing certain death, Tristan resolved to rescue Isolde from the brink of this living hell. His love for her, a force as powerful as the ocean itself, compelled him to act, no matter the cost. Tristan, swift as a hawk, rode towards the path of the procession, his mind racing, formulating a desperate plan. He knew he could not engage the entire escort in a direct confrontation. The numbers were too great, and the queen's safety would be jeopardized in the ensuing chaos. He needed an opening, a moment of distraction, a weakness in their seemingly impregnable resolve. As the procession approached a narrow, winding road that descended into a desolate valley, Tristan saw his opportunity. The guards, confident in their numbers and the isolation of the route, might relax their vigilance for a fleeting moment. He dismounted his horse and secreted himself among the dense undergrowth on a steep embankment, overlooking the path. His bow drawn an arrow, nocked and ready. He waited, his breath held, his eyes fixed on Isolde, who walked with a stoic, heartbreaking resignation, her head bowed. The procession drew closer, the clanking of armor and the muffled thud of hooves filling the air. As the lead guards passed beneath his hidden position, Tristan unleashed his arrow. It flew true, striking the horse of the first guard, causing the animal to rear in panic, throwing its rider to the ground. The sudden commotion created an instant of disarray. Guards shouted, horses whinnied, and the formation broke. In that precious second, Tristan launched himself from the embankment, a blur of motion. He landed among the confused guards, his sword carnlanen flashing in the dim light. He fought with a desperate fury, not aiming to kill but to incapacitate and disarm, creating a path to Isolde. He moved with a speed and precision born of love and desperation, weaving through the chaos, knocking swords from hands, and felling opponents with swift strategic blows. He reached Isolde, who looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and a fragile flicker of hope. Without a word, Tristan swept her onto his horse, which he had quickly retrieved, its reins gripped firmly in his hand. The remaining guards, recovering from the initial shock, began to close in, their anger rising. Tristan, however, was already in motion. He spurred his horse forward, breaking free from the tangled mass of men and mounts. The horse, powerful and swift, galloped away from the scene, carrying them both towards freedom. Arrows flew after them, whistling past their ears, but none found their mark. Tristan leaned low over the horse's neck, shielding Isolde with his body, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm of relief and continued urgency. They left the bewildered guards and the horrifying leper colony behind, a place of unspeakable suffering that Isolde had narrowly escaped. Their escape was not without its own trials. They rode relentlessly, seeking refuge in the wild, untamed forests. Far from the king's reach, they lived as fugitives, finding shelter in caves and under the canopy of ancient trees. Their days were filled with the constant threat of discovery, their nights with the gnawing fear of capture. Tristan hunted for food, his skills as a woodsman and hunter keeping them alive. Isolde, accustomed to the luxuries of a queen, endured the hardships with a resilience that surprised even herself, her spirit mending slowly in the freedom of the wilderness. They drank from clear streams and slept on beds of moss and leaves, their love, though illicit, serving as a beacon in their dark exile. They were often cold, often hungry, but they were together, and Isolde was safe from the terrible fate that King Mark had intended for her. Their time in the wilderness became a legendary part of their tragic story, a period of fierce independence and enduring passion. Tristan had not only rescued Isolde from a fate worse than death, but he had also provided her with a temporary sanctuary, a brief taste of freedom from the rigid constraints of their world. This dramatic rescue of a king and the Justin with Vayans, Tamager de Tristan and Talis to romances, Titrace to Lobo. Number 3. The Red Knight of the Redlands and the Lady's Release. Lady Lioness of the Redlands found herself entrapped within her own castle, a prisoner in her ancestral home, besieged and tormented by a monstrous figure known as the Red Knight. This formidable warrior, clad in blood-red armor, had descended upon her domain with an army of loyal followers, laying waste to her lands and imposing a reign of terror. He had sworn an oath of vengeance against her family, a twisted vendetta rooted in an ancient feud, and had made her life a living nightmare. Each day the Red Knight would hang the bodies of her fallen knights from the trees surrounding the castle, a gruesome display meant to break her spirit and force her surrender. Lioness, a lady of fierce spirit and noble lineage, endured this daily horror, her heart aching for her people and her freedom. But her resolve remained unyielding. She had sent pleas for help to King Arthur's court, but many knights had attempted to break the siege and had failed, falling victim to the Red Knight's immense strength and cunning traps. The hope of rescue dwindled with each passing day. Meanwhile, at King Arthur's court in Camelot, a young unknown knight had arrived seeking to prove his worth. He was Sir Gareth, the youngest son of King Lot of Orkney and brother to Gawain, Gaheris, and Agravain. But he had arrived in disguise, humbly serving in the kitchens as Beaumains, the kitchen knight, to demonstrate his character and earn his spurs without relying on his noble birth. When Lady Lioness's distressed maiden, Lynette, arrived at court, her words sharp with desperation and scorn for the perceived lack of champions, Gareth stepped forward. Lynette, initially disdainful of his humble appearance and kitchen-stained hands, doubted his capabilities, but Gareth, driven by an innate sense of justice and a burgeoning desire to prove his true chivalry, insisted on taking up the quest. King Arthur, recognizing a spark of greatness in the young man's eyes, granted his request. Gareth, now formally knighted, departed with Lynette, his spirits soaring despite her constant jibes and belittlements regarding his origins and his unproven skill. The journey to the Redlands was a relentless test of Gareth's mettle. Lynette's sharp tongue was but one of the many obstacles. They encountered a series of formidable knights, each one more challenging than the last, who guarded the approaches to the Red Knight's domain. First came Sir Kay, Arthur's seneschal, who tried to bring Gareth back to court. Seeing him as an embarrassment, Gareth easily overcame him. Next he faced the Black Knight, then the Green Knight, then the Red Knight. A different one, not the ultimate antagonist. And finally, the Blue Knight. Each encounter was a fierce duel, testing Gareth's strength, skill, and courage. He fought with a growing confidence, his blows true, his defense unwavering. He defeated each of these formidable opponents, not by killing them, but by besting them in fair combat, often winning their respect and sometimes their allegiance. Lynette, though still critical, began to grudgingly acknowledge his prowess, a flicker of admiration replacing her initial disdain. The journey itself was a chronicle of Gareth's transformation from the kitchen knight into a truly formidable champion. As they drew closer to the Redlands, the signs of the Red Knight's tyranny became more apparent. The land was desolate. Its villages burned, its people living in fear. The gallows, adorned with the bodies of fallen knights, stood as a grim testament to the villain's power. Lady Lioness's castle, though scarred by the siege, still stood defiant, a beacon of hope amidst the despair. Gareth surveyed the scene, his heart hardening with resolve. He knew he faced his greatest challenge, yet the Red Knight was no ordinary foe. He was a warrior of immense stature and strength, rumored to possess magical properties that renewed his power with the heat of the sun. The siege had been ongoing for a considerable time, and the Red Knight was confident in his invincibility. Gareth, upon reaching the castle, immediately challenged the Red Knight to single combat. The Red Knight, amused by the young knight's audacity, accepted. Their duel began at sunrise, a momentous clash of steel that echoed across the besieged lands. The Red Knight, formidable and relentless, pressed his attack, his blows heavy and swift. Gareth met him with equal ferocity, his movements quick and precise. The sun, however, began to rise higher, and with each passing hour, the Red Knight seemed to gain strength, his blows landing with renewed power. Gareth realized the magical nature of his opponent's strength. He knew he had to finish the fight before the sun reached its zenith, before the Red Knight became truly unstoppable. He fought with a desperate urgency, his mind racing for a solution. In a brilliant display of tactical acumen, Gareth shifted his strategy. Instead of engaging in a drawn-out exchange of blows, he began to feint and dodge, circling the Red Knight, seeking an opening. He waited for the precise moment, a fleeting second, when the Red Knight's guard was momentarily down. Then, with a sudden burst of speed and power, Gareth launched a series of swift, brutal attacks. He struck at vulnerable points in the Red Knight's armor, battering him with his shield and sword. He drove the Red Knight back, forcing him to lose his footing. Finally, with a mighty blow, Gareth brought his sword down, striking the Red Knight's helmet and stunning him, then quickly disarming him. The Red Knight, defeated, fell to the ground, his red armor no longer shimmering with malevolent power. The victory sent a wave of relief through the beleaguered castle. The Red Knight's army, seeing their leader defeated, scattered in fear. Lady Lioness, who had watched the entire duel from her tower, rushed out to meet her rescuer. Her eyes, once filled with despair, now shone with gratitude and admiration. The Kitchen Knight had proven himself a true champion, a knight of unparalleled bravery and skill. Gareth had not only liberated Lady Lioness from her tormentor, but had also restored peace and order to her lands. His journey from a humble servant to a renowned hero, culminating in the dramatic defeat of the Red Knight, cemented his place among King Arthur's most esteemed knights, a tale famously recounted in Sir Thomas Malory's Morte d'Arthur, particularly within the section detailing the adventures of Sir Gareth of Orkney. This narrative, a cornerstone of chivalric romance, highlighted the triumph of inner worth over outward appearance and the unwavering commitment of a knight to justice and rescue. As detailed in the Winchester manuscript, folio 277R, a pivotal source for Malory's compilation. Number 2. The Emir's Tower in the Clever Disguise. Blanchefleur, a young woman of exquisite beauty and gentle spirit, found herself a prisoner in a vast and opulent tower belonging to the mighty Emir of Babylon. She and Florus, a noble prince from a neighboring kingdom, had been childhood sweethearts, their love blooming from the tenderest of ages. Their families, however, came from different faiths and cultures, a fact that deeply troubled Florus's parents, who desired a more politically advantageous match for their son. In a cruel act designed to separate the young lovers forever, Florus's parents arranged for Blanchefleur to be secretly sold into slavery. She was purchased by merchants, who took her across the sea to the distant exotic lands of the Middle East, eventually becoming one of the prized possessions in the Emir's vast harem. There she was kept in luxury, surrounded by other beautiful women, but her heart longed for Florus and her freedom. She was guarded day and night, her escape utterly impossible through conventional means. Florus, upon discovering the heinous betrayal of his parents and the disappearance of his beloved Blanchefleur, was consumed by grief and a fierce determination. He vowed to find her no matter how far she had been taken, no matter the dangers he faced. He amassed a fortune, selling his possessions and borrowing against his future inheritance, knowing that in these distant lands, wealth often served as the most effective key. He traveled for many months, enduring long sea voyages and perilous journeys across deserts and mountains. His quest led him through bustling markets and whispered rumors until finally he arrived in Babylon, the heart of the Emir's vast empire. There he learned of the Emir's legendary tower, a towering structure built to house hundreds of the most beautiful women from across the world, a place from which no one ever escaped. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that Blanchefleur was there. Gaining entry to the Emir's tower was an impossible task for any ordinary man. The tower was a fortress within a fortress, guarded by eunuchs and loyal soldiers, its walls impenetrable. Florus knew that a direct assault was suicide and that a bribe alone would not be enough. He needed a plan, a cunning strategy that would allow him to bypass the formidable defenses and locate Blanchefleur amidst the hundreds of women. He learned that the Emir's chief gardener, a man named Darius, held a position of trust and had some access to the tower's lower levels. Florus approached Darius with an offer of an immense sum of gold, a treasure beyond the gardener's wildest dreams. Darius, though initially hesitant and fearful of the Emir's wrath, was eventually swayed by the sheer generosity of Florus's offer and the young prince's desperate plea. Darius, now an accomplice, revealed a secret about the tower's internal workings. The Emir, being a connoisseur of beauty and desiring fresh companionship, occasionally allowed two women from the tower to leave for a day, usually to visit the emir's pleasure gardens, after which they were replaced by two new acquisitions. Florus, with his youthful appearance and slender build, could disguise himself as a woman. He would then, through Darras's careful manipulation of the guards and eunuchs, enter the tower in place of one of the departing women, or perhaps as a newly acquired gift for the emir. The risk was immense. Discovery meant torture and instant death, but Florus, driven by love, agreed without hesitation. On the appointed day, Florus, dressed in the finest silks and veils, his face subtly made up, entered the towering structure. He was guided by Darras through a labyrinth of ornate corridors and lush courtyards, his heart pounding in his chest. The air was heavy with the scent of exotic flowers and perfumes, and the sounds of laughter and music drifted from behind closed doors. He managed to avoid suspicion, his disguise convincing enough to fool the guards. He was led to a chamber where the harem women lived, each one a breathtaking beauty. Florus's task now was to find Blanchefleur among them. He knew he could not simply call out her name. He had to be subtle, careful, and patient. He spent agonizing hours, his nerves frayed, observing the women searching for a familiar face, a particular gesture, a glimmer of recognition. He moved through the communal areas, pretending to admire the intricate tapestries or the delicate carvings, all while his eyes darted from face to face. The sheer number of women was overwhelming. He feared he might never find her in eternity. He saw her, Blanchefleur, sitting by a fountain, her head bowed as she wove flowers into her hair, her beauty still radiant, though tinged with a quiet sadness. Their eyes met across the crowded room, and a flicker of recognition, a spark of hope, passed between them. Blanchefleur, initially startled by the sight of the new woman, quickly recognized Florus despite his disguise, a gasp catching in her throat, swiftly stifled. Their reunion was clandestine and brief. They had to be careful, even within the confines of the harem. Darras, ever watchful, helped them to communicate and plan their escape. The following night, under the cover of darkness, Darras orchestrated their flight. He bribed a sleepy guard, opened a seldom used passage, and helped Florus and Blanchefleur slip away from the tower, past the outer defenses and into the moonlit streets of Babylon. They rode through the night, fleeing the city, leaving the towering walls of the emir's harem behind them. Their journey back to their own lands was still long and fraught with peril, but they were together, their love stronger than ever, forged in the crucible of separation and daring rescue. The tale of Florus and Blanches, with its blend of high romance and clever trickery, captivated audiences Grodins and Plov Century, Abord, and Clang Numerous Pratergent. Number 1. The Accused Lady and the Lion's Champion. Lady Lunete, a lady-in-waiting to the formidable Lady Laudine, ruler of the Fountain of Broceliande, found herself in the gravest of predicaments. She had once been a trusted confidant and a crucial ally to Sir Meleagant, the Knight of the Lion, helping him to win the hand of Laudine after the death of her husband, Esclados the Red. But a grave misunderstanding, fueled by the treachery of a jealous rival, the Seneschal Kay, and the king's unfulfilled promise, had led to a terrible accusation. Lunete was accused of treason, specifically of betraying her mistress Laudine and of being the cause of Laudine's sorrow and Yvain's absence. The accusations were baseless, designed to destroy her reputation and her life. Laudine, swayed by the malicious gossip and the persuasive arguments of the Seneschal, condemned Lunete to death. Her sentence was to be burned at the stake, a public and agonizing execution. If no champion appeared to defend her innocence within 3 days, pyre was already being constructed, the wood stacked high, a grim testament to her impending doom. Lunete, distraught and abandoned, sent out a desperate plea for help. She remembered Yvain, who had promised her his eternal gratitude and assistance after she had helped him. She knew that he was the only one who could clear her name and save her from the fiery death that awaited her. However, Yvain himself was enduring a profound spiritual crisis. After marrying Laudine, he had forgotten his promise to her. Remaining too long at King Arthur's court, neglecting his duties as her lord, Laudine, feeling betrayed, had sent her maiden with a ring and a message, casting him out of her favor. This rejection had driven Yvain mad with grief, causing him to wander the wilderness like a wild man, his mind clouded by despair. Only the intervention of a kind lady who cured him with a magic ointment had brought him back to his senses. His constant companion, a loyal lion he had rescued from a dragon, remained by his side. Upon regaining his sanity, Yvain felt a profound sense of shame and regret for his actions towards Laudine. He had been performing various acts of chivalry, championing the wronged, but without acknowledging his true identity, driven by a desire for redemption. When Lunè's desperate message reached him through one of the noble ladies of the court, the plea for a champion against her accusers stirred him to his core. He remembered his oath to her, the debt he owed for her past kindness. Despite his own troubled heart and the precariousness of his relationship with Laudine, he knew he could not abandon Lunè to such a cruel fate. He resolved to answer her call, even if it meant revealing his true identity to Laudine, a revelation he dreaded. He traveled swiftly towards Laudine's castle, the lion running faithfully by his side. Time was of the essence. The 3 days were nearly up, and Lunè's execution was imminent. As he approached the castle, he saw the grim preparations, the pyre, the gathered crowd, the executioners standing ready. Lunè was already tied to the stake, her face pale with terror, her eyes scanning the horizon for a savior. The seneschal, a smug look on his face, stood by ready to watch her burn. Yvain, still anonymous, rode into the scene, his presence causing a stir among the onlookers. He declared himself Lunè's champion, ready to defend her honor against her accusers. The seneschal and his 2 brothers, Lunè's false accusers, scoffed at the unknown knight, but custom dictated that a champion's challenge must be met. The duel began. Yvain, still cloaked in his unknown identity, fought with a fierce determination, his skill owned by countless battles and by the urgency of Lunè's plight. He faced the seneschal and his 2 brothers, who were formidable warriors in their own right, but their malice and deceit were no match for Yvain's righteous fury and his unwavering commitment to justice. The fight was brutal and extended. Swords clashed, shields splintered, and the ground beneath him became stained with blood. Yvain, with his lion sometimes subtly assisting or threatening the opponents, fought strategically, isolating each of the brothers, wearing them down with relentless attacks. His lion, a magnificent beast, circled the combatants, its roars adding a terrifying dimension to the conflict, intimidating Yvain's foes without directly engaging in the fight. Finally, after a prolonged and arduous struggle, Yvain defeated all 3 accusers. He disarmed the seneschal, forcing him and his brothers to confess their lies publicly. The crowd erupted in cheers, their relief palpable. Lunè, weak with relief, was untied from the stake, her life spared. The truth of her innocence was revealed, and the perfidy of her accusers exposed. Yvain, still maintaining his anonymity, then offered a prayer of thanks, a silent gesture of humility and gratitude. Only after the execution was averted and Lunè was safe did Yvain allow himself to be recognized. Laudine, who had witnessed the entire ordeal, was overcome with emotion. Upon seeing her husband, her heart softening with a mixture of relief, remorse, and renewed love. The dramatic rescue of Lunè not only saved her life, but also paved the way for Yvain's reconciliation with Laudine, an act of redemption that brought their love story full circle. Yvain's unwavering commitment to his sworn word, even when he was in the depth of despair, and his courage in facing multiple opponents to save an innocent life, solidified his reputation. This pivotal episode, central to Chrétien de Troyes, Yvain, or the Knight of the Lion, composed in the late 12th century, stands as a testament to the power of a knight's oath and the strength of true friendship and loyalty. It is a story often found in collections like the Chantilly manuscript MS 472, which vividly details Yvain's trials and triumphs emphasizing his chivalric virtues, and the lion's loyal companionship in his quest for honor and redemption.